Trucker kicked a veteran's wheelchair. While bikers watched, 12 Hells Angels made him pay. He kicked an old veteran's wheelchair in front of 12 Hells Angels. And what happened next changed an entire community. Before we begin, tell us where in the world you're watching from. And if you love stories of biker brotherhood, hit that subscribe button to join Bikers Hype and help us reach 1,000 subscribers. Because this isn't a story about revenge. It's a story about respect, redemption, and the power of the ride. Rusty's Truck Stop Diner sat alone on the I-5 outside Sacramento. The neon sign buzzed faintly against a flat gray sky, its R flickering like a heartbeat losing rhythm. Inside, the air smelled of diesel, burnt coffee, and lives that never stopped moving. The diner was a scrapbook of the American highway, cracked vinyl stools, photographs of truckers taped to the walls. A jukebox that hadn't worked since Clinton was president. To the locals, it was sanctuary. To travelers, a momentary pause between miles. That Wednesday afternoon, the corner booth was occupied by 12 men in red and white patches. Their vests read Hells Angels Messi, Sacramento. But anyone who looked closer saw something else. The faded green tattoos of Vietnam, the scars of rice paddies, and the silence of men who had carried more ghosts than stories. At the counter sat Robert Lewis, 82 years old. Double amputee, Vietnam veteran. He'd lost both legs to an IED in '69, but never his purpose. Every month he rolled that same wheelchair from his small apartment to Rusty's, then to the cemetery, visiting the graves of 12 brothers who never came home. To him, the chair wasn't a burden. It was a memorial on wheels. Robert ordered his usual, black coffee, no sugar. The waitress, Denise, poured it gently. "Afternoon, Robert." "Same run tomorrow?" He smiled. "Wouldn't miss it." Promises don't break themselves. Then the bell above the door clanged. A heavy-set man in a grease-stained jacket stomped in. Earl Henderson, 54, truck driver, divorce pending, life unraveling. His eyes were bloodshot from sleepless miles and court papers. He wanted a coffee, a burger, and a world that didn't remind him of failure. Robert's wheelchair sat halfway between counter and aisle, a minor obstacle in a tired man's path. "Move that goddamn thing." Earl barked. Robert looked up, voice calm. "I'll move once my coffee comes, son." The word son, gentle, but to Earl it sounded like mockery. Heat climbed his neck. The diner went silent except for the hiss of the grill. Earl's boot swung. Metal met bone. The wheelchair jolted forward, wheels squealing, coffee splashing, and Robert's frail body pitched onto the tile. His head hit the counter edge with a sickening thud. For half a second, time stopped. Then 12 chairs scraped the floor at once. The corner booth moved as one. 12 men stood, gray hair, leather vests, eyes cold as gunmetal. Ghost, Marcus Chin, led them, the chapter's sergeant-at-arms. He'd been the one who carried Robert out of the jungle that night in '69. They surrounded Earl before he could even reach the door. Ghost's voice was calm, almost polite. "You just kicked a man who lost his legs protecting your freedom." Earl's bravado faltered. I didn't mean he was in the way." "In the way," Ghost repeated softly. "That's what you think of a man who carried half my squad to safety." "That's what you think of my brother." The room felt smaller. Denise froze behind the counter. The other truckers stared into their plates, not daring to breathe. Ghost knelt beside Robert. "You all right, brother?" Robert blinked, dizzy. "Just old bones meeting hard floor." Ghost smiled sadly. "You always did downplay pain." Paramedics were called. Robert was taken to the local ER, concussion, bruises, nothing fatal. But Ghost's eyes never left Earl. "You're coming with us," he said. Earl's instinct screamed to run, but when 12 patched veterans stand in formation, no one runs. They escorted him outside. The parking lot shimmered with chrome, 12 Harleys, each one a thunderstorm waiting to start. Ghost took Earl's truck keys. "You won't need these tonight." The Hells Angels clubhouse on the outskirts of Sacramento looked like any old garage, until the doors closed. Inside, banners of fallen brothers lined the walls. Photos, dog tags, letters from mothers. It wasn't just a biker den. It was a cathedral of memory. Ghost rolled out Robert's damaged wheelchair. The frame was bent where Earl's boot had struck. Ghost placed it before him. "You did this. You're gonna fix it," Earl scoffed. "I'm no mechanic." Tank Morrison, the chapter president, built like a freight train, voice like gravel, stepped forward. Then you'll learn. We don't use fists for lessons. We use time. Earl spent that night under fluorescent light, surrounded by men who once built makeshift bridges under fire. They handed him wrenches, alignment gauges, patience. Every time he cursed, Ghost told another story. We were pinned in 69. Ghost began quietly. Robert said, if I don't make it, tell my parents I thought about them more than fear. 10 minutes later, the IED went off. He lost his legs. I lost 22 brothers. The room went silent except for the click of metal. By dawn, Earl's hands were blistered, eyes bloodshot. He looked at the chair differently now. It wasn't just steel and rubber. It was history forged in blood. Friday morning, they loaded the restored wheelchair into Ghost's van. Robert, pale but alert, waited outside the hospital. Earl pushed him through the cemetery gates of Sacramento Memorial Park. Rows upon rows of white headstones stretched toward the horizon. Robert whispered names. Michael, David James, each one a chapter of pain. At every grave, he placed a single rose and told a story. The medic who bled out in his arms. The sergeant who took a bullet meant for him. The friend who never saw his wedding day. Earl followed in silence, eyes wet. When Robert's voice broke, Ghost took over, finishing the tales that time had stolen. By the 12th grave, Earl could barely stand. He finally understood. The wheelchair he'd kicked wasn't a chair. It was a vessel of promises. Saturday dawned amber over the freeway. The Hells Angels prepared for their memorial run, 12 motorcycles and 1 trucker learning respect. They rode through Sacramento's streets, chrome glinting like prayer candles. Earl pushed Robert's chair across each cemetery lawn, gravel crunching under boots. Every stop was a sermon in silence. Spectators gathered along the road. Some saluted, some cried. Local news cameras rolled, but the men didn't ride for fame. They rode for names etched in stone. By sunset, they had visited all 32 graves. Earl's heart felt heavier and cleaner. That night at the clubhouse, the chapter met formally. Tank stood before them. 4 days ago, this man disrespected one of our own. We could have beaten him. Instead, we taught him. Robert has chosen forgiveness. He handed Earl a temporary vest, embroidered, Friend of Hell's Angels. This means you ride with us on Memorial Days. You guard these graves like they're your own. Earl wept openly. Ghost clasped his shoulder. Respect isn't said. It's lived. Weeks passed. Robert needed surgery, 4 weeks of recovery. He feared breaking his lifelong ritual of monthly visits. Ghost called Earl. You'll ride for him. Earl accepted without hesitation. For 4 weeks, he visited every grave alone, 32 headstones, 32 roses. He spoke each name aloud, just as Robert did. Sometimes club members followed behind in silence, engines idling like a heartbeat. When Robert recovered and returned, he found every grave freshly cleaned, every flower replaced. Tears lined his weathered cheeks. You didn't just fix my chair, he said. You carried my promise. Earl knelt beside him. You taught me what being alive really means. A year later, Earl founded Wheels for Warriors, a non-profit keeping the memorial rides alive. 200 volunteers, 5 states, truckers, bikers, veterans, all riding together to maintain the graves of the fallen. Robert passed peacefully at 85, his legacy multiplied across generations. Earl still visits his grave every month. Ghost, now 86, still rides the lead bike. On the anniversary ride, Earl addressed the crowd. 6 years ago, I kicked a veteran's wheelchair. I thought I was teaching him a lesson in convenience. Instead, he taught me the meaning of sacrifice. Sometimes punishment isn't violence, it's witnessing sacrifice. Sometimes disrespect becomes redemption through understanding. One kicked wheelchair became a movement called Wheels for Warriors, proving that love, respect, and remembrance can change the world. If this story touched your heart, prove your love for the Hells Angels Brotherhood. Like this video, share it with your friends, and subscribe to Bikers Hype to help us reach 1,000 subscribers. Because every click keeps these stories of respect and redemption alive.